Welcome to Catalytic Leadership, the podcast designed to help leaders intentionally grow and thrive. Here is your host, author, and leadership and executive coach, Dr. William Attaway.
Hey, it's William, and welcome to today's episode of the Catalytic Leadership Podcast. Each week, we tackle a topic related to the field of leadership. My goal is to ensure that you have actionable steps you can take from each episode to grow in your own leadership. I believe, like Craig Rochelle has said many times, that when a leader gets better, everybody benefits. Your team, your department, your customers, your clients, your spouse, your kids, everybody. Each week, we spotlight leaders from a variety of fields, locations, and organizations. My goal is for you to see that leaders can be catalytic no matter where they are or what they lead. I draw inspiration from the stories and journeys of these leaders, and I hear from many of you that you do too. Let's jump in to today's interview. I'm so excited today to have Jason Cercone on the podcast. With nearly a decade of experience in the podcast world, Jason has built his brand around the consumptive power of storytelling and simplifying podcast guesting. He helps leaders craft their authentic story, tell it with confidence as a podcast guest, while simultaneously maximizing the value of each guest appearance and establishing thought leadership in their niche. You will also find him hosting Evolution of Brand, a podcast featuring stories and strategies for building an authentic personal brand. Jason, so excited that you're here. Thanks for being on the show.
William, thank you so much for having me. I'm a big fan of what you're doing with this show, and it's great to join you for a very powerful conversation. I'm looking forward to it.
I am as well. I would love, Jason, for you to share some of your story with our listeners, particularly around your journey and your development as a leader. How did you get started?
It started for me, I think, it started entrepreneurship and everything in regards to, I guess, leadership tying into that started at a young age. I started my first little business when I was 13 years old, and that was me managing myself and managing how I ran that little business. It wasn't anything that I was looking for. I stumbled into it. I was just selling football cards and baseball cards to friends. And then I got lumped into doing card shows at collectors, hobbyist events, which was a blast. I loved it. And then moving on, I worked for the same company that my dad was upper management in. It was a grocery store chain in the little town of Bradford, Pennsylvania. It was based out of Buffalo, New York, and Bradford, PA is about an hour and a half south of Buffalo.
Okay.
And I think just knowing that my dad had such clout in the company made me work harder. I mean, I wasn't again screwing around with the guys. I was a teenager, but still in my mind, I knew that there was time you had to work too.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to develop a reputation as a slacker, especially because I just didn't want that to get back to my father. But overall, I just looked at myself as a leader with all of these other people that I was working with. And then a good friend of mine started working there. He was a couple years younger than me. And I just took it upon myself to be in that position of I'm the guy that's going to teach him how to do this job right. And we'll have some time to mess around and have some fun with it. But at the same time, we're going to get the work done, and we're going to make sure that people understand that we can screw around and still get our stuff done.
Yeah.
That was always one of the big arguments with management. Like if you were in the break room twice, I was like, yeah, but my work's done. Why is this an issue? And it was always the constant back and forth. But nevertheless, that progressed through high school, college. I actually got my master's degree in leadership, and I've done a lot in regards to business management, but ultimately with running my own enterprise and my own business and doing a lot with coaching and consulting with what I do now. It's always been a thought process of leadership in every degree. A lot of my focus now is thought leadership, and that's different and the same, I guess, simultaneously. But ultimately, having that thought leadership in a very powerful, prominent position, it makes people look at you and your brand differently. And you are the resource that they're turning to get the transformation they seek in whatever niche you exist in. And I take that very seriously, and I try to build on it every day.
You know, with that background, how would you define leadership?
I would define leadership as a person that understands that they are there to get the most out of somebody without micromanaging and ultimately trying to push them in a specific direction. I think leaders have to be cognizant of what their people bring to the table, whether it's somebody if you're an organization and you've got a team underneath you, or if you're running your own enterprise and you're partnering with other people through JVs or different outsourcing, freelancers, things like that. You have to know what your people can bring to the table, and you have to leave them to create. And I think people know that they can create so much more if their leader is not looking over their shoulder, questioning them, wondering if is that right? Like, are you sure about that? No, let them do their thing, because there's always going to be an opportunity to evaluate and make changes if necessary. And I've talked to so many people that have led in this way. And by letting their people establish their own personal brand, they've felt more comfortable in that environment. They've been able to share ideas much more freely and openly. And the work that they produce is on a much higher level. So I feel leadership is understanding that you have a team of individuals that you need to work with. It's your job to get them pointed in the right direction, but you have to be smart enough to know when to step aside and let them do their thing so your business can thrive.
It seems like that would take a lot of trust on the part of the leader to lead that way.
I agree 100%. And that's something that you can't, again, I mean, when you are building your team and you're looking for the right people to bring into your fold, you have to be very smart and cunning in who you are bringing in. You have to make sure they are a good fit. But if you've made a decision on somebody and you know they can be an asset to your mission, to your culture, if you bring them in and then you don't let them have some freedom to grow and develop as a brand of their own, as a person that is on board to help you grow your brand, you made the wrong decision. If you can't trust them to do the right thing for you, you shouldn't have brought them on board in the first place. So in that initial process where you're getting to know somebody, you want to make sure that they are a person that does serve your needs. And that's a completely different conversation in regards to recruitment. But if they were to let you down to some degree, you're going to need to own that. That's on you, because perhaps they weren't the right fit that you thought that they were. And I know I've been in that position before. It's a terrible feeling, but you have to own it. You have to realize, okay, I'm going to learn from this. I realize that I made some mistakes here. When I look at the next person, I'm going to look a little bit deeper and make sure I know I'm not in a position to make this mistake again.
That's so good. And I think all of us would say we have been there, where we have learned from previous hiring successes and failures, where we got it right and where we swung and missed and said, oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
That was not a good plan.
No, sir.
Jason, you have a lot of experience in podcasting.
Yes.
And you have built a brand around the power of storytelling. I would love to hear more about that and why you think professionals, no matter what space they're in, really need to focus on their authority and elevating their thought leadership status. What do you mean by that?
Well, like I said before, when you have that elevated thought leadership status, people look at you differently. They're looking at you as a resource, as somebody that can bring them transformation. And think about the last time that you had a problem that you were looking to solve. Typically, what we do these days in 2023 is we sit and record. This could be totally different if this is heard 5 years from now. Who knows where we're going with AI and whatnot. But typically what we do is we consult the World Wide Web, whether we go to Google or social media or YouTube, and we type in what our problem is, and we get presented with hundreds and hundreds of possible solutions. And as we look through those solutions, it's our job to sift and filter and find the right one for us. And in doing that, more than likely, we're going to come across a lot of people that feel they have the right answer to whatever this problem is. Now, in doing that, are you going to trust the person who seems a little bit shady? Their messaging just seems completely off. Like, what is happening here? Why I don't get this? Or are you going to put your trust in the person that has a line of people around the block thanking them for helping them solve the same problem as you? And their messaging is clear and concise. And you can tell this is why they have that line of people lined up to thank them, because they've helped solve that problem. And now you are in that same position. Unless you're out of your mind, every one of us is going to look towards that person that can help them, that has the clear messaging, that clearly has other people that are saying thank you for helping. That person is a thought leader. That person has established authority in their niche as a person, a resource, a brand that can help solve a problem. More than likely, they've gotten very specific about what that problem is. They're serving as a scalpel, not a Swiss Army knife. They have one specific problem that they're looking to solve, and they do it with precision and accuracy every single time. That's the type of person that we look for. If you are not taking time to establish yourself as that person in your space, you're missing the mark, because somebody else is, and they're the ones that are going to attract more people. So to do that, telling your authentic story is a tremendous way to get more people to resonate with who you are, what you do, where you want to take people, and how you're going to get them there. And the podcast medium is the greatest stage for telling stories there is, because you have an extended period of time with people on podcasts. I'm a firm believer that with the advent of short form content, that's the buzzword, TikTok videos, reels, all these different short clips, that seems to be what is consuming us on the World Wide Web these days.
Sure.
But it's not new.
Yeah.
I was watching short form content back when I was a little kid. It was called America's Funniest Home Videos.
That's right.
That was TikTok on the television. Now, I think that show is still on, but it's not as good because Bob Saget, RIP, is not hosting the show anymore. That used to be a Sunday night ritual for my family. So short form content's not new. I firmly believe that human beings are going to invest time in the content that they have time to invest in.
Yeah.
So if they have a few minutes, maybe reels and TikToks are going to be serving them and giving them what they need to satiate that little dopamine hit. But if they have half an hour, maybe they're going to watch a sitcom, or they're going to watch a TV show. If they have a few hours, they're going to watch a movie.
Yeah.
In regards to audio, if they are on their way to the gym, at the gym, on a walk, on public transit, in the car, whatever, they have a little bit of time, they might take in a podcast or two. So all of these platforms have always been available to us. We just have more mediums in which to consume them now. So for me, podcasting is where it's at, because when someone has that additional time, they're going to tune into a podcast and you're in their ear for 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour, sometimes even longer than that. And you have just an unbelievable opportunity to make a connection by sharing your insights, bringing value to the podcast, and helping them realize that you are a person, you are a resource that can bring them the transformation they seek.
I love that. And I think that that is so incredibly true. I think that podcasts have taken the place of so many other forms of content, for certain, in my own journey. As during commutes, as I travel, podcasts are a go-to for me for learning. So I love to read, no doubt that will never go away. But podcasts are a different way, because with podcasts, I can hear tone. I can hear expression that I can't get through the written word alone. I find that to be so incredibly helpful, particularly in hearing an author describe a concept or an insight. I hear more than just the words. Podcasts make that possible, which makes me think about, some of the skills that you develop as a thought leader. For somebody who's listening to what you're saying, say, yeah, that's where I want to go. I want to move into this thought leadership space. I want to leverage this and focusing on authority and elevating that status. As you begin to step into the podcasting world, you're going to develop some skills, right? Some speaking skills you're going to develop, and you're going to utilize those, but not just in a podcast, right? That's going to show up in other parts of your life.
Absolutely. for me with podcasting, we all, I think, to some degree at some point fall into a little bit of the shiny object syndrome, where we see something that might be the next big thing that's going to transform and revolutionize our podcast. But that's all well and good. And if you understand how to harness those things, they could be helpful. But to me, there's two very important skills that if you can master these and continue to build upon them, they're going to carry you throughout your podcasting career, but then also transcend podcasting to help you in other areas of your life. The first one is active listening. If you are having a podcast conversation, which to me, what we're doing today, William, having a back and forth, just like two friends catching up over a cup of coffee. This to me is much more engaging for me as the guest. I'm sure for you as the host. And then for the listener, when they hear this product, when it goes live, they can engage and get more captivated through a conversation versus you just having a series of questions that you ask me. And then instead of following up on the question after I give the answer, you just go to the next question. If you're active listening, it allows you to have this powerful conversation to where you may not even look at the sheet in front of you. You may have some questions, but you may never get to them because you don't need them, because the conversation was so engrossing. That makes for more captivating content that people can latch onto. And that's what you need to grow. So active listening is huge. And then overall, it's just the ability to communicate. That's number two. If you can have that type of conversation to where you're actually letting ideas flow and you're not constantly trying to interrupt somebody as they speak, and you treat it as a powerful conversation that can be heard by the world, but in the moment, it's just another person. So you want to be respectful and let them get their point across. If you can master those two skills, that's going to carry you so far in the podcasting space because you're paying attention to the fundamentals. And you can add in all the shiny objects on top of that, but your fundamentals are never going to change. So you have to constantly be putting focus on building those skill sets. Once you have them, and again, I never consider myself a master because I'm never going to get complacent. I'm going to keep pushing to get better and better and better. But I can also use these communication skills and these active listening skills when I'm talking to colleagues, when I'm talking to clients, when I'm talking to loved ones. My daughter, she probably hates that I'm a podcaster. She's 13 and she gets home from school. How was school? Good. Well, you're not getting off that easy. Tell me one thing you learned today, because I'm going to keep digging deeper, which is something I do with my podcast guests. So these are skills that you can use in your personal life and your professional life. If you're on stage, you're going to learn more about tempo and cadence, and that communication that you learn from a podcast can translate to that environment as well. There's so much value in this, and all of it combined makes you a more powerful thought leader.
I love that. And I think that's absolutely spot on. Active listening is a skill that I think too few people focus on. And communication, my goodness. If you can grab onto both of those two, Jason, what a difference you're going to see, not just in your business, but in every part of your life, just like you said.
Absolutely.
Grab
on and don't let go.
Right, exactly. And never stop getting better, right? Never stop evaluating. And I love that you said that, because so often, well, too often, I think leaders will say, hey, when they first start doing something, they have to focus on it because it's new. But then over time, they can begin to feel like, I got this now. I got this. And when you feel like you've got something, there's a temptation to stop learning and you begin to drift. And no one ever drifts toward excellence. We always drift toward mediocrity.
That's right.
And I think what you're describing, this focus on active listening, on communication, these are skills that you never, ever say, I'm done learning. I'm good. I've got everything I need to know here. And I love that you brought that out. I think that's part of what it means to truly be catalytic in your leadership.
Absolutely. It's cleaner mentality. And if no one understands what that means, if you got to pick up the book Relentless by Tim Grover. Just one of the most powerful books, and do it in audio form, because the guy that narrates it will have you running through walls. And I constantly put it on when I'm at the gym just because it pumps me up so much. It's just so damn good. But that cleaner mentality is, I mean, he literally, not to throw a spoiler alert, but like his big thing is done next. And that's how he ends the book. But that mindset is the cleaner is not going to get wrapped up even in the biggest success or in that complacency that a successful conclusion to anything could end. This gentleman was the trainer for Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, hundreds of other athletes.
Wow.
So he's instilling in them a mindset that you don't just stop when you get to that top point. So like Michael Jordan, he would say he would win the championship. He'd take a few minutes to celebrate, and then he'd be talking about what they do have to do next year to defend it. It's constantly striving to get better. And I never noticed this until I heard him say it in the book. Whenever they won a title, the Bulls, when they won their 4th title, he held up 5 fingers. When they won their 5th title, he held up 6 because he was already thinking ahead. Thinking about the next one. I never realized that. That's an incredible testament to the power of never getting complacent with your results and striving to get better. As Bruce Lee once said, I fear not the man that knows 10,000 kicks. I fear the man that has taken the time to master one kick 10,000 times. I know I just botched that quote in the way that it flows, but that's the point. Mastery is all about devoting yourself to one specific skill and then constantly working at it to get better and better and better.
You've talked about already several benefits of podcasting, right? I mean, as we've touched on this, is there anything that about podcasting that is a benefit that a lot of people will overlook or ignore?
I think so. There's a lot of built-in networking capabilities with podcasting, and I'm all about simplifying the process. For me, obviously, those fundamentals are huge. But when it comes down to the act of podcasting, I think this is something that throws a lot of people off. They're making a guest appearance. A lot of times that's called an interview. That word interview, I think it has some negative connotations tied to it. Most likely unintentional, but when you hear interview, at least this is how I see it. I think of two things: a job interview, to where when you walk into that environment, you're feeling a little bit of pressure because you want to speak very fluently and eloquently so you get a chance to move to the next level in the hiring process. And an interrogation where you're got the bright light shining down on you and they're questioning where you were on Friday the 13th at 8:30 p.m. Like, again, I've never been in that, but I've seen enough movies to know that it looks hot and it doesn't look comfortable. And if you come into a podcast with this mentality of it being an interview, there's a small part of you that might feel like you're going to get grilled today. And that's not the most welcoming environment, and it's not going to allow you to be the most authentic leader and present your brand as authentically as you can. So you have to look at the act of podcasting itself as a simple conversation and the start of a brand new relationship. If you come into it with the mindset of, I'm connecting with an old buddy. We used to get together all the time. Now we're going to meet up at a coffee shop and we're going to have a cup of Joe and we're going to catch up on some things. You're instantly putting yourself in a more relaxed state, and it removes this thought process of it being a performance.
So good.
And if you do that right there, it instantly puts you in a better state of mind. So you can speak more clearly. You can have a better conversation. But again, in the moment, you're in front of somebody that could become your next client. Maybe they work with some people who need your specialty or your course or your book. And if you help them create value on their podcast, and I'm speaking from the guest side, if I come into this as a guest and my intent is nothing but value, William, you're going to be the one to endorse me. I don't have to go into sales mode, which is a mistake that many people make because they're thinking about performance. They're thinking they have to use this to close sales. Not realizing that type of approach pretty much kills the content. In a lot of cases, and I've experienced this, you may have as well, we won't air that content because we know our audience doesn't want to listen to an infomercial.
Absolutely.
So treating this as a networking opportunity, as a relationship building opportunity, and not as a performance, that's something that many people overlook, and it can be the most powerful element of the podcasting platform.
Mm. Now, one of the things that I talk a lot about is the importance of building up people in teams and helping the people that you work with and who work on your team, helping them to understand they're not cogs in a machine, that you see them as actual 3D human beings.
Right.
Well, that's the relational aspect of what you're talking about.
Exactly.
When people feel like that, when they feel like a cog or, somebody sitting under the hot light, that doesn't add value to that person. It makes them feel like a commodity, like you're describing. I love the way you talk about that. If somebody wants, if they're listening to this and they're like, okay, I buy it, I get it. I want to move into this thought leadership, this authority space. Do I have to have my own podcast though? That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah, that's the common misconception. In order to leverage podcasting, I need a podcast. And I understand why that is a misconception, but I will break the bubble and spoil it for everybody. No, you don't. And William, you're right. It is a lot of work. Any podcaster can absolutely attest to that. Any podcaster that's doing this with consistency, putting out a show on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, some putting out more than one episode per week, understands that there is a certain level of work required in order to do that effectively. You have to find the right guests. You have to make sure that you have a format that caters to their expertise so they can bring maximum value to the recording. You have to make sure that you're having that good conversation, and maybe the guest is trying to go into sales mode, but you're steering the ship and trying to keep them on track so you can actually air their episode. And there's a lot you can do on the front end to set expectations. And if you do your part and the guest still shows up with their own transactional mindset, you can't win them all, but you did your part to try. Like I could, when people sign up for a recording session with me, they are instantly sent a video that breaks down, this is what I need from you. And it's not long. It's like 2.5 minutes, but it's just some simple expectations because I learned the hard way. You got to make sure people are in front of their computer. Because one time I had a guy call in from rush hour traffic this is an old show that I did years ago. He was sitting in traffic. I'm like, are you serious? Well, I couldn't get back to the office in time. I got stuck, but I didn't want to miss the interview. I'm like, oh boy. Lesson learned for me. I didn't put the blame on him. I just said, no, let's do this again later. And I don't think we ever did now that I think back on it, but I understand that. So at that moment, I need to be clear that you need to be in a quiet recording environment, not honking at other cars that might be cutting you off to get to merge into your lane.
Seriously.
And that was my learning moment, but that's all part of the process of being a podcaster. So now you've got your interview, your guest appearance, your conversation. Now that's done. Now you've got to do all the post-production work. You got to edit. You got to make it sound good. You got to put all the music and whatever ads you might run, intros, outros. Now you got the final polished product. And now you've got to build assets to promote it. And then you've got to share it with the world. And then you lather, rinse, repeat, and do it all over again. That is a lot of work. And the better way to start, if you've never done this before, is to be a guest. Because there are a lot of podcasters who can benefit from your expertise. In fact, they're clamoring for it because they want to feature good quality guests on their podcast. If you've got expertise that aligns with that show, I'm not saying that let's ditch the entitlement attitude right now. You don't belong on every show. You're not a perfect fit for every show. But if you're a valuable resource that sees that they have a powerful message that you can add to, that's when you begin the outreach, and you have to do that with quality as well. But if you want to get into podcasting and you've never done it before, start with being a guest. Because that will allow you to gain confidence, to learn more about the podcasting space. It's going to allow you to develop and craft your story and then tell it. And in doing all this, you're also communicating and hitting new audiences with each appearance, but also building a network. Again, this is if you do this all right. If you just, again, try to show up transactionally, that stuff's usually out the window. But once you get to a point where maybe you're 6 months, a year, whenever you want to reevaluate things, you may say, okay, loving podcasting. I think it's time to start my own show. Now you've got some experience under your belt. It didn't cost you much more than your time. And you've developed a network of people. Hopefully you've stayed in touch with them. So you can now reach out to them and say, hey, I just started my own podcast. I love the conversation we had on your show. You want to join me on mine?
So good.
Because typically one of the biggest issues that new podcasters have in the very beginning is finding guests.
Yeah.
So if you put in a little legwork that serves you at the same time, you've also got a pool of talent that you can reach out to, and you nip that problem in the bud. And that allows you to start off much more strongly and save yourself a ton of time.
Yeah, you've been consistently talking throughout this episode, Jason, about how people add value to other people. And you've used different words, but that's been the theme that I have felt through this whole thing. You're about adding value. If you're a guest, adding value to your host and their show. If you're a host, adding value to your guest and what they're bringing to the table. If you're a thought leader, adding value to the people that you get to share the content and the insights that you have with. I love how this is such an others-focused venture for you. Has that always been the case?
Absolutely. I think you have to think that way, not just with podcasting, with everything you do. It's that servant mindset.
Yeah.
I think sales go much smoothly if you're thinking about that person, and everything that you're doing in your brand can speak so much to how much you're willing to give. And I will say this from a podcaster's position, the presentation or pitch that I receive that speaks to me about what they loved about my content and why they feel they could add to it and why they found it so valuable is going to stand out miles above the person that just says, I'm a 7-figure earner and I've written a book and I have a Ferrari and I do this and I can bench press 500 pounds. If you make it all about yourself, it's harder to differentiate. Because we get so many presentations like that, to where if we get one that says, William, I just listened to episode 137 with Jason and you guys killed it. That was amazing content. I've already told a couple people about it because I just learned so much, and I've been digging your show, and I don't assume that I'm a good fit for any podcast because you know your podcast, or you know your content, you know your audience more than me, but I love the value you're putting into the world. And if you're looking for more guests, I'd like to help you add to that mission. I could add to what you and Jason talked about, but I also have some expertise in X, Y, and Z. If you're open to it, let's hop on a call or let's just move forward. It's totally up to you. I'm willing to do either one, but I'd love to help you grow your show. That's the outreach. It's simple, it's direct, but it puts the ball in the podcaster's court. And too many people, I mentioned that word entitled before. I feel that too many people feel that they are a perfect fit and they're entitled to be on every podcast because of all those accolades. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the accomplishments and the accolades. In fact, I applaud that. And it's going to come up at some point in our conversation, but it doesn't need to be what you lead with. I need to know what you saw in my show that makes you believe your message is going to resonate with my audience, is going to resonate with me, and ultimately put you in a position to win, put me in a position to win, and put our listeners in a position to win. You've got to be thinking about the value you can bring to the table. And if you root all your efforts in that value, it's going to bring so much more in regards to results. But then it also transcends podcasting, which I've mentioned a couple times, which is really what this is all about. The podcasts are the vehicle that get you to that thought leadership status that start to bring more people to your brand so they can see how you can transform their world. So if you do this with precision, accuracy, and consistency, you really can get a lot from it, but you have to be rooted in value first.
I could not agree more. You know, Jason, I could keep talking to you for another half hour. It's just been so
I got time. Let's roll.
Let's keep going. I think I want to have you back for another episode.
I'm more than game. Let's do it.
This has been so helpful because it's so practical. And it doesn't matter where our listeners are leading or what they're leading. Adding value to other people And that applies to every one of us.
Yes.
Like every context that we're in, if we keep that in front, what a difference that is going to make.
100%.
One of the things that I ask every guest as we're wrapping up, one of the things I ask every guest is, is there a book that you would recommend that leaders read? Now, you've already recommended Relentless. Maybe that's the book. But is there a book that made a difference in your journey?
Yeah, I'll double down on Relentless for sure. But the one book that has always been a big factor in everything I do is The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson. And what I learned from that book is it's that edge that it's little things one way or the other could literally make or break what you're doing. And respecting the fact that little incremental efforts done consistently are going to lead to the big result that you're looking for. I think it's something that we often lose sight of because we do live in a highlight reel culture. And a lot of leaders, a lot of professionals will put those highlight reels center stage on their social media platforms, on their websites. And we see it, and sometimes we get blinded by the fact that highlight reel looks so good. I cannot believe they're there. I want to be there, and I want to get there as fast as possible. What that highlight reel doesn't tell you is how long it took for them to get there. So you need to be emulating work ethic, and you have to do those little incremental things each and every day. That's going to get you in a position to make your own highlight reel and to have it be authentic. That's what The Slight Edge will teach you. So I recommend that book to everyone.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. I'm reading Atomic Habits right now by James Clear.
Also a good one.
Yeah, he talks about this, the incremental power, right? The power of the incremental habits, the things that you're doing over time, the 1% better, 1% better
that's
over
right.
time. I've got to check out The Slight Edge. Thank you for that. I'll have links to these in the show notes as well.
Beautiful.
Jason, if you could share one piece of advice with people who are listening today, one thing that you want them to walk away with, what would that one thing be?
Commit. One word, commit. No matter what you're doing, whether it be podcasting, guesting, starting your own business, launching your own brand, you've got to commit to what you want to accomplish. We have a very scary statistic in the podcast space of like the average podcaster stops podcasting between 8 and 10 episodes.
Yikes.
That's scary. And there's a number of reasons that can come into play as to why that may happen. I typically chalk it up to they discover that it's much more work than they thought it would be, which is why I constantly shout from the mountaintops, you're going to have to do a lot of work to make your podcast take off. And there's also that download metric plague and people looking at their metrics far too soon.
Yeah.
I never will deny that metrics can help you and help you make adjustments to your show. But in the very beginning, you can't look at them and get upset because you don't have a listener yet. Yeah. Or you only have a handful of listeners and maybe one of them is your mom and the other is your dad. Like you have to be patient. And I challenge any new podcaster to not look at their metrics for at least 6 months. And if you can go that long, you can probably go a little bit further. Sound like Andy Dufresne in the Shawshank Redemption. But nevertheless, you have to commit with podcasting, whether you're going to start as a guest, like I said before, or if you are getting a show off the ground or in that mindset, a year minimum. I would rather say 2 years, but I know that can be tough. Let's start with a year. That's going to give you a pretty solid foundation. If you make a guest appearance on one show a week, or if you launch your podcast and you do one show a week, that's 52 episodes. That's going to bring a lot of improvements into your world. You're going to get better at your conversation style. You're going to be able to practice your active listening. It's really going to help you understand what this is all about. And hopefully in that time, you've fallen in love with the platform. You've got to commit. If you do not commit to whatever you want to achieve, you're never going to achieve it. That sounds incredibly trite, but it's the truth.
Spot on. I love it. I know folks are going to want to stay connected with you. Jason, what is the best way for people to do that?
Best way to connect with me is join me over at podcastguestingsimplified.com. That connects you to my website. And I would encourage anybody that really wants to know more about this to set up a 30-minute discovery session with me. It's free. It's only going to cost you 30 minutes of your time, but it's going to allow us to share some ideas. And I'd like to hear where you're at, what you're thinking about everything that you heard today, and we'll take it from there. And I offer a lot in regards to helping you be a better guest. If you need some tweaks on your show, I can help you there as well. But ultimately, the goal is to help you establish thought leadership and to master guesting, to get the most out of those efforts so you can get the most out of everything else you do. So podcastguestingsimplified.com is the first stop. Set up a call and we'll go from there.
Love it. And I'll have that link in the show notes also. Jason, thank you for your generosity today in sharing and adding so much value from the wisdom that you have gleaned over the years.
Well, I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today, William, and have this conversation. I have one last message and mission for your audience.
Yeah.
I know how much you are putting into building this show, William. So the audience listening to this conversation today, please take a few seconds to jump over to Apple Podcasts, leave Catalytic Leadership a great 5-star review, as well as the reason why you love this episode. Those reviews are twofold. We love the feedback as podcasters, but they also help more great listeners find the show. So if you're getting something from this content, you're going to want others to learn as well. So take a few minutes to let William know how he's doing. I know he'll appreciate it.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Jason.
You bet.
Thanks for joining me for this episode today. As we wrap up, I have a couple of requests for you. I'd love for you to do two things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to find this podcast. Second, if you don't have a copy of my newest book, Catalytic Leadership, I'd love to put a copy in your hands. If you go to catalyticleadershipbook.com, you can get a copy for free. Just pay the shipping so I can get it to you, and we'll get one right out. My goal is to put this into the hands of as many leaders as possible. This book captures principles that I've learned in 20 plus years of coaching leaders in the entrepreneurial space, in business, government, nonprofits, education, and the local church. You can always connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take a next step with a coach who can help you to intentionally grow and thrive as a leader, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to catalyticleadership.net to book a call with me. And stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, leaders, choose to be catalytic.
Thanks for listening to Catalytic Leadership with Dr. William Attaway. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode. Want more? Go to catalyticleadership.net.